The day was hot, so hot that heat seemed to rise up from the sidewalks in wavy lines. James walked along, wishing he had a car like his friends. 10 days ago, he had gotten his driver's license. Not that it did him any good. His mother used the family car to get to and from work. His father lived in another state. That left James on the hot streets, walking. James had just come from a job interview. He wanted to get a summer job to earn money for a car, but this interview hadn't worked out. Now he was in a strange part of town filled with buildings with boarded up windows and peeling paint. And he had to watch his feet as he walked to make sure he didn't stumble over the places where tree roots had pushed up the sidewalk. So when James heard the man's voice call him from close by, he jumped. "Hey, you're a little nervous, aren't you?" the man said. When he grinned, James could see that several teeth were missing. "No, not really," James said. He stared at the man sitting on the stoop of an abandoned building. The man was wearing ragged clothes and needed a bath, but there was nothing threatening about him. James knew it was best not to act afraid. Still, his heart was beating faster, and he really wanted to run. "You wouldn't have an extra dollar, would you?" the man asked James. "I hadn't had breakfast yet, and it's getting way past lunchtime." James shook his head no. At the same time, he stuck his hands in his pockets to check for the $20 in emergency money his mother had given him that morning. But it was just that, emergency money. She expected James to give it back. "That's too bad. I sure could use a square meal," the man said. "I've been down on my luck for a while now, ever since I came across this so-called piece of magic." James knew he should move on, but the word magic had caught his curiosity. He was reading a lot of books right now about strange, mysterious happenings. He wanted to find out anything he could about magic. "What magic?" James asked. The man stared James straight in the eyes for several seconds. Then he pulled something smooth and white from inside his jacket. It was a bone, perhaps a small human finger bone. "What's magic about that?" James asked. He wanted to touch the bone in the worst way. "Someone down on their luck gave it to me," the man said. "It's magic, all right. It grants any wish you ask for, but I understand you can only have 3. "If it's so magical, why don't you wish for some money?" James asked. "No, I've taken 2 wishes, and that's enough for me," the man said. "Might you be interested in the bone?" James shook his head no, but he couldn't stop staring at the bone, lying in the cup of the man's palm. 3 wishes. He could use those all right. How much do you want for it?" James finally asked. "How much you got?" the man said. James felt in his pocket and pulled out the $20. He held it out to the man. "You've got a deal," the man said, snatching the bill out of James' hand. "Just a few words of advice. Think hard about what you wish for. Everything comes with a price." James wasn't sure what the man meant. All he cared about was getting the mysterious bone. Finally, the man handed it over. It felt cool and smooth in James' hand. He turned it over and over, comparing its length and shape to his own finger bone. When he looked up to ask the man more about it, the man was gone. He'd vanished. James walked the rest of the way home, lost in thought. What wishes would he make? One thing was for sure. He planned on thinking it through. That night, when his mother asked for the $20 back, James almost wished it back in his pocket. But he caught himself in time and told his mother that he had lost it on the way home from the job interview. The lecture he got made him think about how much he wanted to be able to get away from home. That night in bed, James settled on his first wish. He decided he wanted a new red convertible, just like the one his friend Brian had. Brian's family was filthy rich, and Brian got whatever he wanted. James pulled the small white bone out of his pocket, and in the moonlight solemnly wished for a red convertible, all his own. The next morning when James came down to breakfast, his mother was standing by the phone. She looked pale and frightened. The sound of the phone ringing was what had woken James up. "Sit down, James," his mother said. "I've got some bad news." James sat down with a feeling of dread growing in his chest. "Bryant died last night," his mother said. "He was in a car accident, a freak accident. His red convertible was hardly scratched, but he flew out of his seat, and he hit the concrete. He stayed alive for only a few hours after they took him to the hospital." A chill came over James as he thought about Brian. They went way back, to first grade. "There's one more thing," his mother said. "Brian's parents want you to have his red convertible. They said Brian always knew how much you wished you had one." Suddenly, James felt sick. He jumped up from the table and ran to his room. The white bone was lying on top of the dresser. James picked it up and threw it into the back of a drawer. He didn't want to see it anymore. Everything had its price. James didn't drive the red convertible for almost a month. Then one morning he woke up feeling as if a spell had been lifted from him. He grabbed the keys to the car and drove around town for 3 hours. He passed by a lot of kids from his class. Some looked at him funny, as if they thought he shouldn't be driving Brian's car. Others waved and seemed to remember how much Brian had loved the car too. James enjoyed every minute that he was in the car, but he wished somebody could share it with him. Like Molly. She had been in his class since elementary school too. Their last names started with the same letter, and their lockers were always close to each other. Molly had been going out with Jess for half a year now, and since Jess was the only good friend that James had left now, he knew Molly was off limits. Still, James couldn't get her off his mind. One night, he accidentally came across the white bone at the back of his drawer. Turning it over and over in his hands, he wished he could go out with Molly. James woke up the next morning from a bad dream, a nightmare. He was almost afraid to pick up the phone when it rang, but his mother had already left for work. The phone rang and rang. Finally, he picked it up. "James?" a voice choked with tears asked. "James, it's Molly. It just died last night. Nobody knows why. I got to talk about it with you." James listened to Molly as she talked about Jess between sobs. He felt as though he had turned the stone inside. As Molly went on about how much she had loved Jess, James stared at the white bone on his dresser. Just looking at it made him sick. He reached over and threw it deep into his drawer again. A week passed. Jess was buried in the same cemetery as Brian. And Molly began to call James every evening to talk about Jess and how much she missed him. One night, Molly asked if they could take a drive together the next day in Brian's red convertible. James hung up on her and walked over to his dresser. He took the white bone from the back of the drawer. Sitting on his bed, James turned the bone over and over in his hand. Then he made his third wish. He wished his friends would come back again. James finally fell asleep, but he tossed and turned from bad dreams. In the middle of the night, he woke up, certain that he had heard the front door of his house open and close again. After that, he couldn't go back to sleep. He lay still as a corpse in his bed, waiting. Then he heard the footsteps on the stairs, footsteps that slowly but steadily came toward his room. James got up from his bed. He was sweating and scared. The footsteps moved down the hallway closer and closer. Then the door creaked open and the overhead light flickered on. They had come back. Brian and Jess. They stood in his doorway like two zombies back from the dead. Brian was covered with dry blood. Jess's face was gray and swollen. They both stared at James with eyes filled with anger and revenge. They knew. James grabbed for the magic white bone. He squeezed it in his trembling hands and wished them to be gone. But James had run out of wishes. Forever.